Chapter 1. The Day My Family Put Me on Trial. My name is Claire Whitaker, and for most of my life, I believed loyalty meant staying quiet, forgiving too easily, and never questioning the people who shared my blood. I came from a family that smiled in public, whispered in private, and taught me that love was conditional on obedience. So when my own family took me to court in 2024, called me unstable, and tried to erase me piece by piece, they never imagined that silence was not surrender. It was the beginning of a slow, deliberate revenge that would tear our family apart forever. The courtroom smelled of disinfectant and old paper, the kind of smell that tries to convince you nothing ever changes inside government buildings. I sat alone at the defendant's table in Dauphin County Courthouse in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, my hands folded neatly, my spine straight. Years in federal cyber operations had trained my body to stay still under pressure. What they never trained me for was being judged by my own blood. My name is Claire Whitaker. I am 46 years old. I have spent more than 22 years working in federal cybersecurity, the kind of work that lives in secure rooms and quiet corridors. I am used to scrutiny. I am used to being evaluated, audited, questioned. I am not used to being put on trial by the people who raised me. They sat together behind the plaintiff's table, close enough that their shoulders touched. My father, Dennis Whitaker, 73, wore the navy blazer he saves for funerals and church. His hands rested on his cane, fingers tight, knuckles pale. My mother, Elaine, 71, sat beside him with a folded tissue pressed into her palm. Her eyes flicked toward me and away again, as if looking too long might invite something she did not want to feel. Between them sat my younger brother, Ryan, 40, relaxed in his tailored suit. His wife, Megan, 38, sat at his side, posture perfect, expressions smooth and composed. They leaned toward one another, whispering. I sat alone. The bailiff called the court to order. Chairs scraped softly against the floor. Somewhere behind me, someone cleared their throat. My attorney, James Holloway, gave me a brief glance, the kind that asked a question without words. I gave him nothing back. This was not the moment for reassurance. The plaintiff's attorney stood and began speaking in a calm, deliberate tone. He outlined the case as if he were explaining a problem that had already been solved. He said I had exerted undue influence over my elderly parents. He said I had manipulated family assets. He said my long exposure to high-stress federal environments had affected my judgment, my emotional stability, my ability to make sound decisions. He did not say the word unstable. He did not have to. The implications settled into the room on its own. As he spoke, I felt the shift around me, a slight lean forward from the gallery, a subtle tightening in my mother's jaw, my brother's gaze fixed straight ahead, confident, untroubled. He had always believed in momentum. He believed once things started moving in his favor, they could not be stopped. The attorney talked about my absence, about how often I was away, about secrecy, about the toll of a career lived behind locked doors. He suggested that someone like me might not be fully aware of the influence she wielded or the harm she caused. I listened without moving. Every part of me wanted to stand and correct the record. I could have spoken about the evaluations I passed every year, the clearances renewed again and again, the oversight I lived under. I could have spoken about the money I quietly sent home, the calls I made when I could, the holidays I missed because I was told my work mattered. But I did not, because this was not about facts. It was about a story, and they had already decided which version of me they wanted the court to see. When the attorney finished, the judge adjusted his glasses and looked down at the file in front of him. He flipped a page, then looked up at me. "Ms. Whitaker," he said, "do you wish to respond to the statements made by the plaintiff?" The room went still. James shifted beside me, ready to rise. I stood first. The sound of my chair moving felt louder than it should have. I faced the bench and felt every eye in the room on me. I could sense my mother holding her breath. I could sense my father bracing himself. I could sense my brother waiting, certain that whatever I said would only help him. For a moment, words pressed against my teeth, years of them, every justification, every explanation, every truth I had swallowed to keep the peace. Then I understood what they wanted. They wanted me emotional, defensive, loud. They wanted me to sound exactly like what they had accused me of being. I took a breath and let it out slowly. "No, Your Honor," I said. "Not today." A ripple moved through the courtroom. Someone whispered. James froze, surprised. Across the room, Ryan's mouth curved slightly, almost a smile. Megan's expression did not change at all. The judge studied me for a second long. He nodded once as if he had seen this kind of choice before, even if he did not understand it. "Very well," he said. I sat back down. My hand moved to my bag without thinking, resting on the thin leather folder inside. It was not thick. It did not look impressive. That was the point. The truth rarely announces itself. It waits. Behind me, my mother drew a careful breath. My father shifted in his seat, the smallest movement, like he was trying to make himself invisible. Ryan leaned back, satisfied. Megan crossed her hands in her lap, calm, prepared. They believed this was already over. I kept my eyes forward, my expression neutral. Years in my line of work had taught me that silence is often mistaken for weakness. People relax when they think you have nothing left. I knew better. I knew that everything happening in that room was unfolding exactly as I had planned, even if no one else there had figured it out yet. Chapter 2. The Invisible Daughter. My brother's confidence did not come from nowhere. It was built the way some families build a house, one small decision at a time, one excuse layered over another, until the foundation feels permanent. I grew up outside Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, in a neighborhood where everyone kept their porch lights on and the sidewalks were always clean. My father, Dennis Whitaker, worked as a utilities engineer and came home smelling faintly of metal and motor oil. My mother, Elaine, kept the world running on schedules. School lunches packed the same way every morning, laundry folded into perfect rectangles, bills paid early because being late felt like failure to her. From the outside, we looked steady. Inside, there was always an invisible line. My younger brother Ryan lived on the warm side of it. I lived on the side that learned to carry my own weight without asking. I was the kid who brought home report cards with straight A's and apologized when I got a B+. I made honor roll without being reminded. I learned to cook pasta for myself when my parents were busy and told them it was fine. I thought being easy was the same thing as being loved. Ryan was different. Ryan was loud and charming, the kind of boy who could grin his way out of trouble. When he broke rules, my parents looked for reasons. When I followed them, they barely noticed. It was not cruelty. It was habit. They worried about him, so they watched him. They did not worry about me, so they assumed I was fine. I remember one afternoon when I was 16 and Ryan was 14. I was at the kitchen table with college brochures spread out in front of me, planning my escape with quiet determination. Ryan had just been suspended for fighting. My father came home early, his shoulders tight, his face set. He looked at Ryan first, then he looked at me. "Claire, I need you to be the steady one right now." I stared at him, waiting for a thank you or an apology or something that acknowledged what he was asking. Instead, he walked past me into the living room, his voice softening as he spoke to Ryan. My mother sighed and rubbed her forehead. "He's under a lot of pressure," she said, as if that explained everything. I wanted to say I was under pressure too. I wanted to say I had been steady my whole life, but I stayed quiet because quiet was what I was good at. By the time I left for college, I already understood the rules. Ryan was the one who needed support. I was the one who could manage. I left Pennsylvania for school, then moved farther away for training, then into federal work that demanded long hours in silence. My family told people they were proud of me. They also stopped expecting me to show up. Ryan stayed close. He went to a local university. He moved back home for a while. He took Sunday dinners with my parents like they were appointments. He was present, and in my family, presence counted more than effort. At first, the distance felt temporary. I thought we would find a new balance once everyone adjusted, but distance has a way of turning into a story, and my family began telling a story where I was always gone, always too busy, always choosing work over them. It showed up in small ways. A birthday call that never came until the next day, when my mother would laugh and say she had been so busy. A family decision made without my input, like selling my grandmother's dining set, and I would hear about it after the fact, as if it were a weather update. A new roof on the house, paid for in part by money I had wired quietly, and no one mentioned it again. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself adults don't keep score. I told myself love is not measured by invitations or phone calls. Then Thanksgiving 2018 happened. I drove in from Virginia after a week that felt like it had lasted a month. The air was cold and sharp, the trees stripped bare along the highway. I arrived with a pie from a bakery my mother liked and a bottle of wine my father pretended not to care about. When I stepped inside, the house smelled like turkey and rosemary and the same cleaning product my mother had used my entire childhood. Elaine hugged me quickly, her arms stiff, her cheek pressed against mine for half a second. "You made it," she said, and I could hear relief mixed with surprise. Ryan was already there, leaning against the counter in a crisp button-down shirt, relaxed in a way I never felt in that house anymore. "Hey, big sis," he said. "Look at you, always showing up like the president." I smiled because correcting him would have taken more energy than I had. We sat down for dinner. My father carved the turkey with quiet pride. Football murmured from the living room. Conversation stayed light until Ryan cleared his throat in that practiced way he used when he wanted everyone's attention. "So I have news," he said. My father looked up immediately. Elaine's eyes brightened. Ryan leaned back in his chair like he was settling into a spotlight. "Redwood Hills Holdings is really taking off. We just landed a new partner. Things are moving fast." My father nodded, impressed. "That's my boy. I knew you'd figure it out." Elaine reached across the table and squeezed Ryan's hand. "I'm so proud of you. I told your aunt you were destined for something big." Ryan's smile widened. He talked about expansion, investment strategy, future plans. My parents leaned in, hungry for every word. I sat there nodding politely, the way I had learned to do, listening as if I were a guest. At some point, Elaine turned to me, her voice light, almost playful. "So, Claire," she said, "when are you going to settle down?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean," she said. "A real home, a real life, not all that government secrecy stuff. You can't do that forever." I set my fork down carefully. "I have a life, Mom." Elaine smiled like she was humoring a child. "You have a job." My father cleared his throat as if he were trying to soften the moment. "Your mother just wants you close, like Ryan." Ryan lifted his glass, amused. "To being close," he said. Something in my chest tightened. I looked at my father. He didn't meet my eyes. I looked at my mother. She was smiling, convinced she had said something reasonable. After dinner, while Elaine packed leftovers in plastic containers, I stood at the sink rinsing dishes. My father came up beside me, drying a plate with a towel that smelled like bleach. "You know," he said quietly, "families need someone who stays." I turned to him, soap on my hands, and I almost asked which someone he meant, if he wanted me, if he missed me, if he understood what he had asked me to give up every time he praised Ryan for being present. But his eyes drifted towards the living room where Ryan sat laughing with Megan, completely at home. I nodded, because that was what I always did. In the courthouse, years later, people would act like the lawsuit was sudden, like it was a shocking betrayal out of nowhere. But I knew the truth. It didn't begin with a summons. It began the moment my family stopped treating me like a daughter and started treating me like an absence. Chapter 3: The Silence Before the Storm. After that Thanksgiving, I tried to convince myself I was being sensitive, that adulthood simply looked like distance in busy calendars. Real trouble did not announce itself with shouting. It showed up in my inbox. In the spring of 2019, I was living in Arlington, Virginia, working long days, sleeping light, always half listening for the buzz of my phone. One night, I opened my laptop to clear emails before bed and saw a message with an official-looking logo at the top. It thanked me for my application to a Veterans Assistance Program called the Keystone Veterans Relief Fund. It said my request was under review. I stared at the screen, waiting for recognition to kick in. It never did. I had not applied for anything. I did not need to. My benefits were straightforward, my records clean, my finances stable. I told myself it had to be a mistake, some clerical mix-up, some automated system pulling the wrong name. 2 weeks later, another email arrived. This one confirmed that supporting documents had been received. It listed my full name, my service history, and an address that made my stomach drop, my parents' address in Pennsylvania. The next morning, I called the number at the bottom of the email during a break. A woman with a calm voice answered. She asked me to verify my identity. When I told her I never applied, there was a pause, the sound of computer keys clicking. Everything came in properly, she said. Signed forms, a copy of an ID, even bank information. My bank information? I asked. Yes, ma'am. What address is listed? I asked. She read it out. My parents' house. I thanked her, ended the call, and sat staring at my desk until the edges of my vision blurred. I had spent years tracking threats that hid behind screens. This one was hiding inside my family. That night, I opened the Cumberland County Recorder website and searched my parents' address, telling myself I was just being thorough. The page loaded slowly, then the result popped up like a slap. The house had been refinanced. The deed still showed my parents' names, but the paperwork referenced an LLC I had never heard of, Redwood Ridge Holdings. I refreshed the page twice, as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something harmless. They did not. I called my father the next morning. He answered on the third ring. "Hi, Claire," he said, like it was an ordinary day. "Dad, did you refinance the house?" I asked. Silence filled the line. Not confusion, more like calculation. "We made some changes," he said finally. "It was easier that way." "Easier for who?" I asked. He sighed, the way he used to sigh when I asked questions he did not want to answer. "Ryan has been helping us handle the paperwork. You know how complicated things get." "It's under a company," I said. "Redwood Ridge Holdings." "It's just paperwork, Claire," he said. "Don't get worked up." I hung up before my voice could break. I called Ryan next. He picked up immediately, upbeat. "Hey, sis, everything okay?" "No," I said. "I saw the records. Redwood Ridge Holdings. Why is the house tied to your company?" He laughed lightly. "It's asset optimization," he said. "You're reading too much into it." "I'm getting emails about a Veterans Assistance Program I never filed. It was sent to Mom and Dad's address." A pause. Then his voice turned patient, like he was speaking to a difficult child. "You always jump to the worst-case scenario," he said. "It's a bridge, that's all. Everything is legal." "Is it?" I asked. He exhaled. "You've been under a lot of stress. That job has you wound tight. You should talk to someone." Before I could answer, Megan's voice came on the line, smooth and calm, the tone she used when she wanted to sound caring while guiding a conversation away from danger. "Claire, I hear fear in your voice. When people work in high-pressure environments, they sometimes start seeing threats everywhere. Projection happens." I gripped the phone harder. "You're a therapist," I said. "You know what you're doing." Her tone stayed gentle. "We love you," she said. "We're trying to keep the family stable." I ended the call. My hands shook, not from fear, from rage that had nowhere to go. The emails kept coming, status updates, requests for clarification, polite reminders, all addressed to my name, all routed through my parents' address. I contacted the program again and reported identity misuse. They opened a review, but they warned me it would take time. Time was exactly what my family counted on. Time dulls suspicion. Time makes people tired. I needed help that didn't come from family. That's when I called Ethan Morales. Ethan and I had crossed paths years earlier through compliance work. He had a steady way of speaking, the kind that made problems feel solvable without pretending they were small. We met at a coffee shop near Rosslyn early on a Saturday morning. Ethan arrived with a tablet and a folder of printed notes. I pulled what I could from public records and financial traces, he said. Redwood Ridge Holdings shows up in more than one place. In what way? I asked. He tapped the screen. Property-related paperwork, a couple banking connections, and something tied to small grant transfers. The amounts aren't huge, which is part of the point. Small numbers slip through. My mouth felt dry. Can you tell if my parents were forced? I asked. Ethan hesitated, then shook his head. On paper, it's voluntary, he said. Both signatures are clean. The notary stamp is valid. I stared at him. So they knew? I said. They knew enough to sign, he said carefully. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say my parents would never. I wanted to cling to the version of them that lived in my childhood kitchen, but the evidence did not care about my feelings. As if the paperwork wasn't enough, the social fallout started next. Ryan and Megan filed their lawsuit, and somehow it didn't stay private. A local paper ran a short story about a family dispute involving assets and a federal employee. My name appeared in print like a stain. At work, conversations shifted around me. A colleague who used to stop by my office stopped coming. People smiled less. They kept their questions polite and shallow. How are you holding up? One coworker asked in the hallway. I'm fine, I said. That's good, she replied quickly and walked away like she had touched something hot. Friends from home called less often. When they did, their voices carried that careful distance people use when they want to be supportive without getting involved. It's just hard, one friend said. Family is family, you know? I swallowed my response and let the call end. I drove back to Pennsylvania once in the summer of 2021 and tried to talk to my mother in her kitchen. The same countertops, the same familiar smell of dish soap, the same calendar on the fridge. She didn't look up from the mug she was holding. Mom, did you know about the application? I asked. Elaine set the mug down slowly. You always assume the worst, she said. I have emails. I have records. My name is on documents I never signed. She crossed her arms. We trusted your brother, she said. It was temporary. Temporary theft is still theft, and my voice shook. Her eyes flashed with something like anger. You come in here acting like we're criminals, she said, after everything we've done for you. I stood there in the silence that followed and realized the truth was not going to be spoken inside that house, not from them. The final piece came late one night in 2023 when Ethan forwarded me a scanned document with a note. Look at the secondary contact. I opened it and felt my stomach drop. Megan's name, not just mentioned casually, listed clearly as a point of contact connected to the grant paperwork. I sat alone at my kitchen table in Arlington, the room dark except for the screen's glow, and let the weight settle. My parents had signed, Ryan had executed, Megan had guided. Every choice was locked into place by ink. Something in me went quiet. I stopped calling to ask for explanations. I stopped trying to be understood. I stopped offering chances for them to soften the truth. I started organizing everything. Emails, records, dates. The kind of clean timeline that doesn't argue, it only shows. I stopped asking questions. I stopped explaining. I started preparing. Chapter 4. The Paper That Closed the Doors. Preparation became a routine, quiet and methodical. I built a timeline the way I would build a case file at work, clean enough that it could stand without my emotions holding it up. I saved every email. I pulled every public record. I labeled every document with the date it appeared and the date I found it. I kept copies in 2 places and printed the most important ones because paper feels real in a way screens do not. Ethan Morales helped me translate the financial mess into a story the court could understand. Not a story made of feelings, but a story made of numbers. He never tried to comfort me. He only asked careful questions. "Do you remember when your parents refinanced?" he asked one afternoon, seated across from me at a small conference table in his office. "Late 2018 or early 2019, I said. He nodded. "And you never signed anything?" "Never." He tapped the folder. "Then we treat your name like a stolen tool. We show how it was used, where it traveled, and who benefited." By early 2024, my evidence was no longer just a collection of suspicious pieces. It was a pattern, the kind that holds up under light. James Holloway, my attorney, reviewed everything and told me to keep my expectations realistic. "This will not feel fair," he said during our first meeting. "Family cases rarely do, but if you stay calm and we stay focused, we can let the documents speak." I smiled without humor. "They already decided who I am," I told him. James looked at me, steady. "Then we do not argue with the story. We replace it." The day we returned to court in Harrisburg, the air felt heavier than the first hearing. I arrived early and walked through security with a familiar sense of detachment, like I was entering a secure facility. The courthouse smelled the same, disinfectant and paper, but the atmosphere was different. People in the hallway spoke softly. A few faces from local media sat on benches with notebooks open, watching the doors as if something dramatic might happen. Inside the courtroom, the benches were fuller. I recognized a couple of people from the first day, neighbors of my parents, acquaintances from the community, drawn by the promise of a family downfall. James sat beside me, his hands folded. He whispered, "Stay with me. Do not react." "I won't," I said. My family entered together, just as they always did. Dennis walked slowly, leaning on his cane. Elaine stayed close to him, her hand hovering near his arm. Ryan looked fresh and confident, like the past months had been a minor inconvenience. Megan wore a soft-colored blouse under her blazer, a deliberate choice, the kind meant to project warmth and stability. They did not look at me. I did not look at them. The judge took the bench and called the case. The plaintiff attorney spoke first, his tone slightly less bold than before. He repeated the same themes: concern, protection, confusion. He suggested again that my work in federal cyber operations had made me paranoid, that I was misinterpreting normal financial planning as wrongdoing. When he finished, the judge turned to my side of the room. "Miss Whitaker," he said, "you declined to respond previously. This is your final opportunity before the court proceeds. Do you wish to be heard?" I stood. For a moment, the room felt suspended. I could hear the faint hum of the lights. I could hear someone in the back shift in their seat. I could feel my mother's eyes on my face without looking at her. "Yes, Your Honor, I would like to submit a compiled document for the court." James stepped forward and handed the folder to the clerk. It was not thick. It did not look impressive. That was the point. Most lies are built with volume. Truth usually fits in a neat stack. The plaintiff attorney stood sharply. "Your Honor, we have not had an opportunity to review this," he said. The judge lifted a hand. "Sit down," he said. The attorney hesitated, then obeyed. The judge opened the folder and began to read. At first, his face remained neutral. He flipped a page, then another. His eyes narrowed slightly. He paused, scanned a paragraph again, then continued. The silence stretched. Across the room, Ryan shifted in his chair. Megan's hands tightened together in her lap. The judge looked up. "Miss Whitaker," he said, "are you stating that these transactions were conducted without your authorization?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "And that your identity was used in connection with Veterans Assistance application?" "Yes." The judge's gaze held mine. "Has this material been submitted through appropriate compliance channels?" James spoke for the first time. Yes, Your Honor, these records were flagged through federal compliance review prior to this filing. We are submitting a consolidated packet for the court's record. The judge returned to reading. The courtroom remained still, the kind of stillness that feels like weather changing. What he was reading was simple: irregular transfers that did not align with the stated purpose of the accounts, documentation of veterans' assistance applications tied to my name and my service record, routing details showing money passing through accounts connected to Redwood Ridge Holdings, additional forms listing Megan as a secondary contact, and a small trail of payments linked to her private practice clients that did not match legitimate billing patterns. The judge set the folder down and removed his glasses. "This court will clear the room," he said. A ripple ran through the benches. "Your Honor," the plaintiff attorney began. The judge's voice hardened. "Clear the courtroom," he repeated. The bailiff moved quickly, guiding the gallery toward the exit. Reporters protested quietly, but they were pushed out with firm hands. The doors closed. The quiet that followed was absolute. Ryan's attorney leaned toward him. Megan whispered something to Ryan, her voice tight. "This is ridiculous," Ryan said, louder than he intended. "This is a family matter." The judge looked directly at Ryan. "Mr. Whitaker, remain seated." The side door opened and two federal agents entered the courtroom. Their presence changed the air immediately. Authority has its own gravity. One agent spoke in a calm voice. "Ryan Whitaker, Megan Whitaker, please stand." Ryan did not move for a second. He looked at my parents as if they were waiting to stop this. Elaine stared straight ahead, face pale. Dennis, his mouth opened slightly, then closed. His hands gripped his cane. Megan stood first, chin lifted, trying to regain control. "This is improper. There has been no due process." The agent repeated steadily, "Please stand." Ryan rose slowly. His confidence was gone now, replaced by disbelief. The agents stated the charges clearly: fraud, identity misuse, improper diversion of federally administered assistance funds. The words fell into the room like stones. Megan's composure cracked. Her hands trembled as the agent guided her arms behind her back. Ryan turned his head sharply toward me. "You did this," he said, his voice raw. I met his eyes. "You did it," I quieted. He looked away. My parents sat frozen, as if their bodies had forgotten how to move. Elaine's lips parted, but no sound came out. Dennis stared at the empty space in front of him, as if he could not look at his son being led away. The agents escorted Ryan and Megan out through the side door. When it closed, the silence returned, heavier than before. The judge gathered his papers. "This matter is recessed pending further proceedings," he said. He stood and left without another glance. James touched my elbow. "Are you okay?" he asked. I nodded, though my chest felt hollow. My parents still did not speak. They did not look at me. They sat as if the arrest had drained them of language. I gathered my bag and walked toward the exit. My steps were steady. My hands did not shake. I felt no rush of victory, only the weight of permanence, the knowledge that some truths cannot be carried back once they have been set down. The doors closed behind me. The truth stood. My family did not. Chapter 5. Winning cost me everything. Outside the courthouse, the air felt too clean, like the world was trying to pretend nothing had happened inside. Sunlight bounced off the steps and the parked cars, and people walked by with coffee cups and shopping bags, moving through their day without the slightest idea that my family had just broken apart behind those heavy doors. I stood there for a moment with my bag on my shoulder and felt strangely weightless, not relieved, not triumphant, just empty, as if my body had set down something it had been carrying for years and now did not know what to do with its hands. By the time I reached my car, my phone had already started buzzing. A text from Ethan. "They moved fast. You did what you needed to do." I stared at the message without replying. Another buzz. James. Call me when you can. You handled it well. Stay quiet for now. Then a notification from a local news alert. The story hit before I even drove out of the parking lot. It was a messy headline, half-informed and fully hungry. Federal agents arrest local businessman after courtroom filing. Family dispute escalates. Veterans relief program involved. In the days that followed, the public decided who I was the way strangers always do. Some people called me courageous. They wrote it like I had stormed a battlefield. They sent messages saying they wished they had my strength when their own families crossed lines. One woman emailed my work address and wrote, "Thank you for proving we do not have to stay silent just because the people hurting us share our last name." Other people called me disloyal. They said blood is blood. They said family matters should stay private. They said I was cold, vindictive, heartless. They said my career must have made me paranoid, that I had turned on my parents, that I had destroyed my brother's life for pride. I read those comments late at night on my couch in Arlington, the glow of my phone lighting the room. I should have been numb to strangers after years of seeing what people say online, but this time it cut deeper because the accusations sounded like my mother's voice, my father's silence, my brother's smug certainty. At work, the reaction was different. It was quiet, contained. My supervisor called me into his office and closed the door. "Claire," he said, "we reviewed the situation. You followed proper channels. You acted within policy. Your clearance is not at risk." I nodded, gripping my hands together in my lap. He leans back. "I'm not asking for details. I'm just telling you, professionally, you're in the clear." "Thank you," I said. He studied me for a moment, then softened. "Take some leave if you need it." I left his office feeling no lighter. Being cleared by an institution does not heal what a family breaks. It only confirms the truth you already knew, that you did the right thing and still paid for it. The legal side moved forward like a machine. Ryan and Megan were processed, arraigned, assigned counsel, dates were set, motions filed. My name appeared in paperwork that I was not supposed to see because I was not supposed to care, because in the eyes of the system, this was now a case, not a collapse. My parents were not charged. Their age and health were factors, and there was no appetite for punishing two elderly people who could claim they were confused, pressured, misled. Part of me felt relief. Another part of me felt a cold anger that surprised me, not because I wanted them in handcuffs, but because I wanted them to be forced to say out loud what they had done. I wanted the truth to touch them the way it had touched me. Instead, the truth lived in paperwork, and my parents lived in their silence. A few weeks after the arrest, I drove back to Mechanicsburg. I did not call ahead. I told myself I wanted to spare them stress. The real reason was simpler. I could not handle hearing my mother's rejection through a phone speaker. If they were going to shut me out, I wanted to see their faces when they did it. The house looked exactly the same porch light, same trimmed bushes, same wind chimes by the front door. For a moment, standing on the walkway, I felt like I was about to step back into a version of my life that still made sense. Elaine opened the door before I knocked, as if she had been watching. Her eyes widened when she saw me, then narrowed. Not anger, exactly, more like fear of what I might say. "Claire," she said. "Mom," I replied. My voice was quiet. "I just want to talk." Elaine glanced behind her. Dennis was in the living room, sitting on the couch with the television off. His cane leaned against the armrest. He looked older than he had in court, like the last few weeks had scraped something out of him. Elaine stepped aside, letting me enter, but she did not hug me. The air inside the house smelled like lemon cleaner and something faintly sweet, familiar, almost cruel. I stood in the entryway and looked at my father. "Dad." Dennis did not stand. He did not smile. He looked at me as if I were a stranger who had come to collect a debt. "I didn't want it to go that far," I said. Elaine's mouth tightened. "You didn't want it to go that far." "Someone used my name," I said. "Someone filed for veterans relief with my information. That's not a misunderstanding."
Elaine's eyes flicked away. Ryan was trying to help us. He was stealing, and my voice cracked on the word. I hated that it cracked. I hated that even now I felt like I had to sound controlled to be believed. Dennis finally spoke. "You don't know everything." I stared at him. "I know you signed. I know you put the house under his company. I know you let them use my address and my history." Dennis's jaw worked slowly. "We did what we thought we had to do. To protect him," I said, "not to protect yourselves, not to protect me." Elaine's lifted her chin. "You always make it about you." I felt something harden inside me. Not anger, not hatred, just clarity. I did not make it about me. You made it about me when you dragged me into court and tried to paint me as unstable so you could take everything. Elaine's eyes flashed. We were scared. Scared of what? I asked. Scared that the truth would make you look like you chose him? Her shoulders sagged. For a moment, she looked tired, almost small. "We are old, Claire. We can't start over." I realized then what she wanted from me. She wanted comfort. She wanted me to hold the consequences for her, to carry the weight so she wouldn't have to. The same role I had always played, steady, quiet, useful. I looked at my father again. "Do you want to say you're sorry?" Dennis's eyes dropped to his hands. He said nothing. Elaine's voice turned flat. "We need peace." "Peace," I repeated softly. Elaine nodded once. "And you bring chaos." The sentence landed like a door slamming. It was calm, almost polite, and it made everything unmistakable. I took a slow breath. "Then I'll go." Neither of them stopped me. Neither of them asked me to stay. I walked out of the house and closed the door behind me, and it felt like closing a chapter I had been rereading my whole life, hoping the ending might change. Back in Arlington, my life returned to routine on the surface. Meetings, emails, security checkpoints, the hum of a job that keeps you moving so you do not have time to feel. But when the day ended, there was no family call to make, no home that felt like it was waiting for me. My phone stayed quiet in a way it never had before, and that silence was louder than any courtroom. For a while, I told myself I had lost everything. Then, one night, standing at my kitchen sink, watching water run over a coffee mug, I understood the trade I had made. Silence would have preserved my family. It would have kept the holiday photos intact. It would have let my parents stay comfortable. It would have kept Ryan protected. But that silence would have erased me. The truth preserved my name. It preserved my integrity. It preserved the part of me that still believed a life should be built on something real. And it cost everything else. That's what karma looks like when you stop expecting it to feel satisfactory. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's simply everyone living inside the consequences of what they chose. If you were in my place, would you protect your family or would you protect the truth? And if you've ever been forced into a choice like that, tell me what you chose and what it cost you. I didn't win. I just stopped running.